The silence in my late husband's office was suffocating. Floyd had passed away less than a week ago, and already his two adult sons were sitting across his mahogany desk, acting like corporate liquidators. I was 58 years old, sitting in the very chair where I used to bring Floyd his morning coffee, listening to his children methodically slice up our life together. Julian, the eldest at 42, sat with his hands folded neatly over a leather briefcase. He had his father's sharp jawline, but none of the warmth. Next to him was Brandon, 39, trying his best to look sympathetic while constantly checking his gold watch. They had barely visited Floyd during his brutal 6-month battle with cancer, but they certainly made time to show up for the accounting. Julian cleared his throat, leaning forward with a measured, clinical expression. He explained that they had reviewed their father's updated estate documents. According to the latest draft, the main property in Sacramento, worth roughly $900,000, was designated for the two of them. The mountain house in Tahoe, another $800,000, was also theirs. The business assets, the investments, the remaining liquid funds, all assigned to the bloodline. For me, after 22 years of marriage, they offered a single life insurance payout of $200,000. Brandon added, with an almost painful amount of fake empathy, that they were willing to give me 30 days to pack up my belongings and find a small apartment. Then came the real knife in the back. Julian slid a piece of paper toward me, explaining that Floyd had accumulated nearly $170,000 in uncovered medical expenses during his final months. Since I was listed as his primary healthcare proxy, those bills were technically my responsibility. After settling his debts, I would be left with a grand total of $30,000 to rebuild my entire existence. They sat there waiting for me to break down, cry, or scream. Instead, I stared at them in total disbelief. When they finally left, leaving behind the heavy stench of cold calculation, I collapsed into Floyd's desk chair. My hands trembled as I opened the small bottom drawer where he kept his private belongings. Beneath old receipts, my fingers brushed against something cold, a small, heavy brass key attached to a tag from First National Bank, stamped with the number 412. The next morning, I took the key to my estate attorney, Arthur, a longtime friend of Floyd. Sitting in his sunlit high-rise office, Arthur looked at the draft Julian had provided and nearly lost his temper. He begged me to let him file an injunction immediately. He insisted there were clear signs of coercion, that Floyd's mental state during his final weeks was compromised, and that no judge in the state would enforce such a cruel distribution. I looked at Arthur and told him to prepare a complete waiver. I wanted him to draft a document stating that I voluntarily surrendered every single claim to the real estate, the business, the bank accounts, and the physical properties. Arthur stared at me like I had completely lost my mind. He practically yelled at me, asking why on earth I would hand over millions of dollars to two greedy men who were actively trying to ruin me. I quietly told him that fighting them in court would take years, drain what little money I had left, and eat away at my soul. I asked him to include just one specific clause in the agreement. In exchange for my total surrender of the assets, Julian and Brandon had to assume full, legally binding responsibility for all of Floyd's outstanding medical debts and future estate liabilities. Arthur tried one last time to stop me, but when he realized my mind was set, he reluctantly agreed to draft the paperwork. Leaving his office, I drove straight to First National Bank downtown. Patricia, the branch manager who recognized Floyd, escorted me into the underground vault and helped me unlock safety deposit box 412. Inside the long metal box lay a single, thick leather journal and a sealed manila envelope addressed directly to me in Floyd's messy handwriting. Sitting in the private viewing room, my hands shook as I broke the wax seal. The letter inside began with an apology. Floyd wrote that during his final weeks, Julian and Brandon had come to him while he was heavily medicated, dropping subtle threats about contesting his long-standing original trust and dragging me through endless legal battles after he died. Floyd knew his son's dark nature better than anyone. He realized that if he left me everything in a standard will, they would harass me, sue me, and make my life a living hell for years. So, Floyd played them. He secretly allowed them to coax him into signing a hastily prepared, flawed estate revision that gave them all the visible, heavy assets, the properties with high tax burdens, the operational business burdened with silent corporate debts, and the legal responsibility for his lingering affairs. So, Floyd played them. He secretly allowed them to coax him into signing a hastily prepared, flawed estate revision that gave them all the visible, heavy assets, the properties with high tax burdens, the operational business burdened with silent corporate debts, and the legal responsibility for his lingering affairs. Then, Floyd detailed what he had quietly done for me over the last 5 years of our marriage. He had systematically transferred his actual personal wealth, over $3 million in private liquidity, stock portfolios, and offshore holding assets, into an irrevocable family trust set up under a separate entity name, with me listed as the sole beneficiary and primary trustee. The properties he left to his sons were heavily leveraged, and the business was secretly on the verge of a massive tax audit due to years of reckless management by Julian, who had been quietly skimming funds. By accepting the estate, his sons were not inheriting a fortune, they were inheriting millions in immediate financial and legal liabilities. 2 weeks later, we gathered in a formal conference room at the downtown courthouse to sign the final settlement papers. Julian and Brandon arrived wearing custom suits, barely hiding their triumphant grins. Their high-priced attorney sat beside them, smugly pushing the final waiver across the table toward me. They thought they had broken me. They watched with victorious smiles as I picked up the pen and calmly signed away every piece of property, every house, and every named asset to the two of them. Julian actually chuckled under his breath, shaking his head at how easily I had surrendered. As soon as my signature was on the paper, Arthur slid our secondary document across the polished table. He calmly instructed their attorney to read the debt assumption rider and the certified estate ledger attached to the back. The room went dead silent. The smug smile vanished from the attorney's face as his eyes scanned the attached corporate audit and debt liabilities. His face turned completely pale. He leaned over and began urgently whispering to Julian, his voice cracking with sudden panic. Julian's arrogant grin slowly collapsed into utter horror as he learned the truth. By taking full ownership of the estate and signing the release, they had officially taken on over $2 million in immediate debt, impending tax penalties, and operational back taxes, while completely waiving any right to contest Floyd's private holding trust.